Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good morning to you. This is Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo and broadcasting on TV1, proud member of the Capital Maharaja Group. And from time to time, like old girlfriends, I suppose, things just don't go away. They keep bouncing back and hitting you right in the face. And such is what has happened to that terrible trouble at the central bank, the bond scandal. And yesterday, the public were treated to yet another whistleblower's expose. And this time it deals with the expenses and the misuse or the use of the former governor, Wijewardena Mahendra's official credit card. To discuss this and quite why this problem won't go away is the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. W.A.Wijewardena. Very good morning to you.
Very good morning, Faraz.
And thank you very much for being on Newsline.
It's my pleasure here.
And yesterday we were treated also to a statement by Mr. Vasanta Samarasinghe, the convener of the Voice Against Corruption. Let's listen to a short clip of what he had to say yesterday.
By the time the bond scam had become one of the biggest scams, Wijewardena Mahendran had already committed several small-scale thefts. He has swindled 66 million rupees of public funds from the central bank in the country on 163 occasions. This is a report compiled by the Internal Audit Department with details dating up to the 1st of August 2016. It contains details of the dues in the former governor's overseas travels and his credit card payments. We exposed details that he had purchased a clothing item from Europe worth 2 million rupees. This has been paid for through such methods. There are also payment dues for the former governor's entertainment expenses. Then there are also shortcomings in the payment for ordinary official expenses. There are also shortcomings in the administrative expenses immediately after Wijewardena Mahendran left. The head of the STF was arrested for misusing a sum of 140,000 rupees of public funds. In that case, Wijewardena Mahendran should be behind bars for the 66 million. It has been 5 months since this report was compiled. What measures have been taken to date?
And that was what Mr. Vasanta Samarasinghe, the convener of the Voice Against Corruption, had to say. Now, can I get this right from you, Dr. Wijewardena? First of all, of course, what's available on the web and so on. We don't know if this is the genuine article. But when you read it, and the man from the central bank, what does it indicate to you? What are the chances are that this is not some sort of hoax?
Faraz, we still don't know whether it is an authentic report or not.
Right.
We have to wait for a response from the central bank.
Yeah.
As in the case of the previous whistleblowers one, central bank issued a statement.
Yeah.
And it didn't deny that it was a report that had been prepared in the central bank.
Yeah.
Similarly, I hope the central bank of Sri Lanka might come before the public and make an announcement within a very short period of time. But of course, when you go through this report, again going by the professionalism that they have displayed, the internal audit practices that they have used, the way that the report has been compiled, I feel that it would have been a report that had originated from the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So what we feel here, Faraz, is there is now whistleblower number 2,
Right.
who is operating in the central bank. Probably he is angry now because no action has been taken against the type of abuse of power
Indeed.
by the previous governor, and he wants actually to bring it to the notice of the authorities as well as members of the public that central bank had been operating without following any rule or any system which should meet the requirements of a good governance government. So that's the judgment that I can make out of the report.
Now, Dr. Wijewardena, when I read that report, there's one thing that caught, everything about it caught my eye, but there's one thing that caught my eye particularly, and that was that there was about just under 8 million rupees. It's 8 million rupees, 7 point something million rupees was paid out where there was no receipts. Now, over here in this company, if you travel around and, it has to be authorized first of all, and you do, and you come back, you need to supply receipts. If you don't supply receipts, you don't get paid. It's very simple. Now, I can't imagine that it's any different at the central bank. Can you just claim money?
Well, far as the system should be now, the governor of the central bank and all other senior officers, they have to travel on many occasions abroad as well as locally on official duties.
Right.
They can't carry cash with them, and therefore they have been issued with a credit card, and that's a perfectly normal thing.
Right.
But of course, far as the perks, the remuneration of the governor of the central bank by in terms of the Monetary Law Act has to be determined by the President of the Republic on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance.
Right.
So already those perks have been determined by the President, and all the governors so far, they had actually followed the limits that had been fixed for the governor by the President.
Right.
In this case, what has actually happened is most of these limits had been exceeded by the previous governor according to this leaked report.
Right. Previous governor as in Arjuna Mahindran.
Yes, Mr. Arjuna Mahindran, yes.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter for the President to inquire into this now, because I feel the failure at several levels, because in the case of the central bank, the governor is the CEO, and we have the internal audit department which has prepared this particular document, and the internal audit department is supposed to report direct to the governor.
Right.
Because the governor is expected to function as the good governance official in the central bank.
Right.
So all other officers who are working in the central bank, if there's an impropriety or irregularity, those matters would be brought to the governor's notice by the internal audit department, so that the governor can take action. But of course, the governor also should be controlled. For that purpose, in the case of central bank, there is a special audit committee of the Monetary Board.
Right.
And the Director Internal Audit of the central bank has to report to this audit committee from time to time. The audit committee has to go through the reports, and then it has to make a recommendation to Monetary Board, because even though the governor is the CEO, the final authority vests with the Monetary Board of the central bank.
Right.
Now I find that there's a failure of the Monetary Board also.
So basically, either this internal committee, audit committee didn't do its regular job, or they did their regular job and the Monetary Board chose not to do anything about it.
Probably what would have happened for us is that when Governor Mahindran was holding office, the officials of the internal audit department wouldn't have been at liberty to question the expenditure pattern of the governor, because he is the CEO.
Right.
So because of that reason, my guess is that even the audit committee wouldn't have been informed of the proper thing. But of course now this report has been filed in August 2016. And
but remarkably close to Mr. Mahindran leaving office.
No, that's why the report would have been actually prepared after he is leaving the central bank.
Yes, but they may have been compiling it.
They would have been compiling. The statistics would have been compiling. They would have been compiling, because in the case of the central bank, for us, if any payment has been made by an officer, because even though the governor has incurred the expenditure, the sanctioning of the payment should be done by the officials of the central bank. Now, in terms of the procedure there, if they had paid anything over and above the limits that had been allocated for the particular officer, the officer should be surcharged. Now, there is no way for surcharging Governor Mahindran, but he has already left the central bank.
But he's still hanging around the
but of course that has to be determined by a court of law.
Oh, I see.
Then the official who has been responsible for sanctioning that particular payment will be surcharged. So that is that's the risk that the officials of the central bank are running through.
Now, there is reference in this report constantly to something or some abbreviation, SG. What does SG mean?
SG here actually refers to Secretary to the Governor. That's
Right.
an official of the central bank who has actually to provide all the logistical services for the governor to travel abroad and
would
also
that
function.
SG, in the case of Mr. Mahendran's SG, would that person have been a central banker from
The central
within?
bank officer. It's a central bank officer, but of course we can't blame that particular officer for us because he or she
Yeah.
has to work under governor and
Yeah.
also has to actually carry out.
What I was trying to find out whether this SG was brought in specially to be
No.
the SG.
See, the particular officer is a central bank officer because normally no governor in the central bank in the past had attempted to bring an official from outside to function as the secretary of the governor because it's always a central bank officer who would know the
And who
central
knows
bank
the system.
systems and the
Right.
central bank procedures. But
So-
we can't blame that particular officer for us because the particular officer has to carry out the instructions given by the governor.
Now, I can understand if the owners of the Capital Maharaja Group, if one of them, the owners, if the owner says, look, pay this, I've lost the bill, pay it. And then it gets paid, but then that's one person who owns the company. But this is the central bank we're talking about. This is not owned by one person, it's owned by the public, in effect. So, you know, when the SG makes a note and says, pay this, bills have been lost, we're not talking of 100,000 rupees or 500,000 or whatever. The total is around 7 million plus. It sounds terribly odd, and it sounds like what you gather from reading all these different things that keep coming out of the central bank is that there has been a robust disregard of the rules and the procedures. It's a robust disregard based on impunity or the knowledge that you enjoy full impunity. That somebody, and in this case obviously the Prime Minister, because this man's hand-picked. Do you think central bankers are ashamed of that 17-month period?
The reason why that those bills should have been paid for us is that because we have to trust the governor. I mean, he is the CEO and he is the governor of the central bank, and the whole nation has kept its confidence in the governor because we trust him to protect the value of the money that we are holding.
Yeah.
So if the governor says, okay, I have incurred this expenditure and I have lost the bill,
Yeah.
but if it has happened again and again, then of course it's a problem. For one or two occasions, yes, we can allow it, but
Well, there's a whole list of it, and so when you look at it, either this governor has been some sort of bumbling, muddle-headed chap who's not meticulous. How on earth can such a person run the central bank?
Yeah, that's a problem for us because if it has happened only on one occasion, we can
Yes, you
actually
can accept
excuse
that.
it, accept it. But of course, if it has happened repeatedly, then of course it's a matter for the officials who have sanctioned that payment to inquire about it.
And when you
also-
examine these things, there appears to be double bookings of hotels. Mr. Samarasinghe is suggesting something else. But I checked with some other former governors of the central bank, and I posed the question whether that governor, Mr. Cabral in this case, whether he's ever travelled out officially with his wife. And the answer was no. He said, you can go through all the records, answer is no. The point I'm trying to make is, and I think the point that Mr. Samarasinghe is trying to make, is that if you were travelling with your wife for some reason and you could have taken and paid for it yourself, why the need for a second room? It appears that there has always been a second room.
Yeah, but of course, without going into details for us, we cannot
No, you can't
jump
speculate on
into
that, no.
conclusions in this regard. And in this instance, just like the bond scam, I think there's a case for the president to appoint another special commission of inquiry to find out the details of these particular payments and see how the monies have been spent by the previous government.
The questions are coming in thick and fast. One of them says 163 violations and total 66 million rupees. That's about in 17 months. Heaven forbid that Maithripala Sirisena, president of this country, was with it and recognized what was happening and just flatly refused to give him another contract. Because had he been in place, God only knows what would have happened to all these people, all this money.
Yes, Farhad. Actually, as I told you before, the remuneration of the governor has to be fixed by the president on the recommendation of the Minister of Finance in terms of the Monetary Act. The president has already done that. So no governor even in the past had exceeded those limits.
And that was another question. Somebody else is saying, what are the limits imposed on the governor?
Limits are actually the reasonable limits. For example, we'll have to go by the best practices in the central banks in other countries. For example, in the case of Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada has voluntarily agreed to publish all the details of the travels and the entertainments that the governor and the senior officials, that is deputy governors and the board members, have incurred out of the monies of Bank of Canada in the website of the Bank of Canada. So it's in public domain so that anybody can examine and question and see whether the limits are reasonably higher. For example, for us now, we all know in the case of say the Washington DC, the hotel charges are very high and we can't expect the governor of the central bank to stay in a
budget
hotel.
Airbnb.
He has to stay because he has to entertain other officials, other representatives and so forth. So the normal room rent in Washington DC may be about $500. But if he has exceeded that limit, then it's a matter of, we have to question why he has exceeded that limit and why he was not able to stay in a hotel at that particular limit. So the limit has not been fixed in terms of monetary value, but the limit is actually fixed in terms of the reasonableness of the expenditure that has been incurred by the government.
But it sounds, it looks like the governor has had an absolutely cavalier attitude to these expenses. He's had no, he's done his returns late and so on, and it's constantly late. It indicates that it's like, perhaps, I don't know, it's like the son and the father in a company. And they own, father owns the company and son's given a credit card and he's not as careful. And so, he's doing what he wants. And all these systems that dad may have imposed in the system has been abused. But, you can understand that because in the end of the day, same pot. But this is the central bank. There have been rules and traditions all established by successive governors. And here you get some chap who's not even a citizen of the country to start with. And you would have thought that he would be a good ambassador of good governance. Because when you're the governor of the central bank, you're up there. You're with the president, the prime minister, the treasury secretary, you're up there. So when you're up there and you are preaching good governance and talking of good governance, and good governance is what made you get that job, well, you'd imagine that you want to be a pretty good ambassador. But in this case, it's my own personal view that this governor must have been easily the worst possible ambassador of good governance.
Yeah, that's true for us because the governor is expected to set an example for the other employees of the central bank. Because all other employees are expected to, on their return from abroad, immediately, within 14 days time, they have to submit their bills.
Right.
If they don't do that, actually, even penalties are imposed on those other officers.
Right.
So if the governor does not adhere to the particular rules in the central bank, where after returning from abroad, he has failed to submit his bills and also claims of travel abroad within the stipulated period of time, of course it's a bad example that has been given to the rest of the employees of the central bank. So it's a very serious matter for maintaining good governance and also discipline within the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So that may be the reason why the central bank officials have been angry, and the particular whistleblower number 2 has chosen to release this particular report to the public domain now.
You know, these whistleblowers are absolutely marvelous. And we also must bear in mind that, you know, in the past we've had overseas governments and various watchdogs complain bitterly and making a lot of noise when they perceive that the Sri Lankan political hierarchy or the legislative hierarchy are making undemocratic or abnormal events. They made a lot of noise. But, you know, I'm shocked that none of these so-called international watchdogs and good governance activists and advocates and so on, they have not said anything. Not a word, not a hum has come from Singapore, for example. Maybe they don't have a history of involving themselves. But, you know, there was a whole lot of people and organizations in the past who complained. They're complaining about the way the war was handled at the end, the way this was done and that was done, and all sorts of jolly things. Where on earth is the IDU, the Democratic Union, when all this is happening?
Now, for us, you can't blame those international organizations because this was not in public domain so far. Only last week, the people of Sri Lanka were treated to the horrendous story of abusing power by the previous governor.
Yeah.
And it has come to public knowledge now. They are waiting for a response from the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Central Bank will have to now come out and either deny that the existence of this report, or they will have to accept that the existence of the report. Then, of course, then there is a separate procedure that has to be followed by the government as well as the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. As I told you, if a particular officer of the Central Bank has abused his powers and exceeded the limits beyond the ones that had been approved for him, he has to pay it back to the Central Bank. And if that has not happened, it is always possible for the government to appoint a committee of inquiry with powers to record evidence, see the examine records and so forth, and come up with the credible story. Now, these are the two areas of action which the government can take now, because the central bank can initially it can conduct an inquiry based on this report and ask the governor to pay back.
Yeah.
Or if the governor contests the particular audit report, then the government will have to appoint a commission of inquiry and inquire into that. Then the government can take action on that. Because the matter is now, because the central bank enjoys the independence on its budget for us, because central bank has to conduct its monetary policy also independently of the political authorities. Now, the parliament has given this independence to central bank in the belief that the central bank will not abuse that independence. So this is an occasion where the independence has been abused, and then it becomes a serious matter for the parliament, and also it will give a good opportunity for parliamentarians to take the independence away from the central bank, which is actually not good for Sri Lanka.
But I hear what you say, Dr. Wijewardena, but 163 violations. Mr. Samarasinghe says 66 million. This is unacceptable. And here is somebody who is officially, according to the Ministry of Finance, does not hold any sort of, he's not employed in any way by the Ministry of Finance. But these letters are, they rely on the quaintness of the English language. Because when they say he's not employed, well, he could be an invitee, he could be a consultant. We know all these things. And the thing is, it's like some sort of little lost lamb who's found its way into the corridors of the Treasury and who's wandering about lost, and then wanders into this committee meeting and that committee meeting and sits himself next to the person who's chairing the meeting. And he's a de facto. It is de facto. Why is he there then? I mean, the cleaners.
Yeah, I mean, now this is a serious matter for the government to consider, because...
what is its role, Mr. Dr. Wijewardena?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because as far as the government is concerned, it has a right to tap the brains of the people, whether
Fine,
they
then
are
say so. Why all this?
But of course, with the new information coming from the central bank, Faraz, it's actually a kind of taint on the image of the good governance government today.
How long have you worked at the central bank?
I have
before
worked
you retired?
37 years.
37 years.
Yeah.
Were you proud?
Well, of course, not only me, Faraz, all other former central bankers.
Were you proud of your 37 years there?
30 years, yes. We didn't come across that kind of a scandal inside the central bank.
Are you sad now? When you
We are sad, not only me, and also all the former central bankers whom I meet. They are now ashamed of admitting that they had worked in a place called Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
That's very sad.
Yeah, very sad situation.
That is very sad.
Very sad. But of course, we'll have to admit, Faraz, with the appointment of the new governor, things have now been changed inside the central bank, and we hope that the matters should be taken care of by the new monetary board under the new governor.
One of the newspapers, there's a report today to say that the central bank is keeping a close eye on the governor's, the son-in-law's connected company, Perpetual, and that they can't do various things. Do you think that's about right, about those censures? Because the governor speaks of having censured this company on two occasions.
There are unofficial reports coming from the central bank that the monetary board of the bank has taken action against the particular primary dealer.
Yeah.
There are several sanctions that have been imposed on this primary dealer so that he cannot play the same active role which he had played in the past in the government securities market. But of course, we have to wait for the conclusion of the particular special presidential commission of inquiry.
I have a problem with this matter. Why is it that the governor of the central bank, Dr. Kumar Swamy, upstanding and honourable man that he is, why can't he just issue a statement and say, this is what we've done?
Yeah, I mean, he should. I mean, in this era of transparency and full disclosure, probably there's nothing wrong in the central bank coming out with a story today. They're giving the full details to the members of the public, because otherwise it is in the eyes of the members of the public, in the eyes of the overseas institutions which have to deal with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. The central bank has become a mystery today. So that the mystery has to be resolved as quickly as possible if the central bank wants to build up its credibility and reputation.
And this is the man that the Prime Minister still, to this day, hasn't explained the role of Arjuna Mahendran in the corridors of power in this country.
Yeah, it's a big dent on the reputation of the new government, because what has happened is that you have an official who is alleged to have abused his power, exceeded his limits, used the monies of the central bank for personal use, which is not permitted under the law or under the prescriptions given by the president of the country, of course the government will have to take serious action against it. We have to look into it, inquire into it, and the government has to now actually clean its own name. Otherwise what would happen is, in the eyes of the public and international organizations, we are considered as a country which condone the abuse of power. And it has already been revealed by the latest rule of law index compiled by the World Justice Project. After the election of the new good governance government, we have actually slipped down on the scale as well as in the ranking. Because we were supposed to improve it, but we have slipped down.
That must make, as much as you are sad about what's happening at the central bank now, after 37 years of loyal and professional service, for which actually, we don't get these opportunities often. Thank you for that input over 37 wonderful years. But what's happening now must also make the people of this country terribly, terribly sad, because good governance was what they came in on. We expect a delivery of good governance. Well, we can live in hope. Already 1 month has gone into 2017, and soon it'll be that fateful day, 2 years since that first bond made its way out in the open market. On that note, Dr. W.A. Wijewardena, thank you very much for being here with us.
You are welcome.
And that's it from Newsline. Do join us again tomorrow morning, where Ms. Sonali Wijewardena will be interviewing Mr. W.A.Wijewardena, the Deputy Minister, on Newsline. The only place to be at 7 o'clock and finishing at 7:30. On that note, take care. Have a great week ahead. God bless.